You know I'm right. The perfect 10 episode right here on WG Sports Radio Network. Nick Durst, joined once again by Joe Calabrese. Joe, episode 10, and good amount of stuff to talk about, and who knows how much stuff we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. But NFL Draft, the ratings were great, which I predicted on the last episode. 55 million people stayed and home and watched the draft in everyone else's homes. And I know you were a very big fan of having the at-home draft. So what are your thoughts on how everything played out from a broadcasting perspective?
I believed under the circumstances having to set up people from home. I think they did a really, really good job. And the truth of the matter is that although it's nice and exciting to have the draft in different locations and see the fans and see people traveling, like last year when they had it in Nashville, it was a lot of fun when they closed down the main street over there in downtown Nashville. But the truth of the matter is I thought the draft was so much more enjoyable seeing people work from home, seeing how everybody had different office setups, seeing the different coaches, seeing the different general managers, seeing all the kids with their dads, and just and then also seeing the draft prospects at home with their families getting the call, putting the hats on, having like little draft get-together parties, even though they weren't really practicing close social distancing from home. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I think the NFL did a good job, and I think it was just it was much more homely than in years past, and I think that made it much more enjoyable.
And a big shout out to the Zorro group. I know they were the ones in charge with getting all the broadcast equipment out there. So really great job by those guys to get the technology done. What were your thoughts on like the NFL ESPN crossover for the draft coverage?
Well, usually I turn into NFL Network for the NFL draft because I like Rich Eisen and I like the Kurt Warner and all the other coverage, right? So over the years, it used to be Mike Mayock, who now moved on and became the Raiders general manager. Daniel Jeremiah is good. So I like the NFL Network staff. Under the circumstances, I could see why they needed to kind of combine resources. I thought what they had was pretty good. The only one who I didn't think was any good was Michael Irvin. I don't think he really should have been there. He was just contributing nothing to that. Outside of him, everybody else was pretty good.
Thoughts on Trey Wingo over Rich Eisen for the broadcast?
I like Trey Wingo. I'm not gonna. This is no knock against Trey Wingo. Like I said, I'm more biased and I enjoy the NFL Network crew doing the draft more. But for what it's worth, the fact that they just combined personalities, under the circumstances, it was fine. I think they did a good job. Wasn't perfect. Wasn't the best draft you're gonna have with like all those guys like together. I thought it might have been a little too much. I think you could have even cut down Irvin and maybe one or two other guys, but it was good.
For the first time ever, you had the commissioner doing all 7 rounds, and I think that was pretty.
Yeah,
he was not liking that.
Out by pick 10.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest complaint is it was about 40 minutes until the first pick on round 1.
Yeah, what the hell was that?
Brutal.
They didn't get the draft going. The first night of the draft.
My guess is they were having technical difficulties on like the actual draft process, and like just do random crap on TV. Get Peyton Manning to talk for 20 minutes on some stupid video package, and that's what we'll do.
It's certainly possible, but I mean, the first round of the draft on Thursday night didn't finish until after midnight. Like, come on already. If you're going past like 11, the latest 11:15, something's wrong.
Absolutely. All right, so to the draft now. Big storylines. Obviously you got Burrow at the top. He was taken, no surprise. Tua goes to the Dolphins. Herbert goes to the Chargers. And I think of those 3, Herbert has the chance to have the most immediate success. Not because he's necessarily the best, just because the Chargers have such better weapons around him as opposed to the other guys' scenarios. And then the guy that has the best chances for success as far as the quarterback goes is the big controversial pick here. And we're talking about A-Rod and J-Lo. We're not talking about A-Rod and J-Lo, but we're talking about Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love in Green Bay. Big head scratcher, Joe, to see Love taken with the first pick for the Packers. And the Packers, who desperately need a wide receiver ever since they let Jordy Nelson go, do not draft one wide receiver.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that out. I know Aaron Rodgers is getting up there in age. Believe it or not, here's a good fact. So when Aaron Rodgers was drafted, Brett Favre was 35 years old. Aaron Rodgers, now this year, as the Packers drafted Jordan Love, is 36.
So what does that tell you? It tells you Sam Darnold's going to be a bust and Rodgers will be a jet in 5 years.
Let's not get carried away yet.
Oh, man. All right, and then the Raiders, they just took every wide receiver available. Who knows what they're doing? Las Vegas has to be flashing.
They took a billion wide receivers, and they have 2 quarterbacks who can't throw beyond 6 yards. It's really funny.
And we'll get to the Giants here, who are just taking $1 million offensive linemen. Then they got some pass rushers late. What are your thoughts on the Giants overall? Give them a draft grade here.
I think considering the circumstances, remember they didn't have their own 3rd-round pick because of the Leonard Williams trade, which you don't like, right? You didn't like that.
Who
one.
Does?
I
don't even think Dave Gettleman likes that trade at this point.
They traded him, and then you had to pay him. That's why players don't get traded as much, because then after you trade for a player, you got to give them money, which takes up money on the cap. But I think the Giants had a very solid draft. I really like Andrew Thomas. I think he was one of the 2 or 3 best offensive tackles in the entire draft, and he was a starter immediately at Georgia from his freshman season on. He plays both left side and he plays the right side, so he could play left tackle, or he could line up at right tackle and get and play against matchups against like the Redskins, who took Chase Young, number 2 overall, right? So Andrew Thomas is a big upgrade. They took a couple of maulers late in the draft who are developmental prospects, but let's say one pans out. Now, all of a sudden, you get 2 offensive line pieces from this draft, which is super important for both keeping Daniel Jones upright and Saquon Barkley. You give him more holes to run through. And so they took Alabama safety Xavier McKinney with their 2nd round pick. And I know you don't really like this pick because you compared him a little bit to Landon Collins. I think the better player comparison for him is Minkah Fitzpatrick, because I think he's a little more rangy. I think he's a much better cover guy than Landon Collins was, as opposed to Collins, who was just more of like an instinctual player and a hard hitter. Sometimes those players don't really last too long in the league. So I think McKinney falling into he was supposed to be he was supposed to be a 1st-round prospect, to be honest. He's very good. So the fact that he fell down to them in the 2nd round, it was very good. I give him a B+. The one thing that they didn't really shore up, which they absolutely desperately need, is an edge rusher, and they need a pass rusher. But I think considering the circumstances, Gettleman did very solid. He plugged in some holes with the available picks that he had. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do this season, because their secondary and their defensive line, for sure, are both shored up and improved. Blake Martinez was a very good acquisition at linebacker. So at the end of the day, we'll see if the lack of pass rush hurts them. But the running game and the offense should be greatly improved. And like I said, I like the secondary and I like the defensive line.
So you were just gushing over Gettleman's picks here. I don't know, because he just trades away the best wide receiver in football, Odell Beckham Jr., and gets Kevin Zeitler to play right tackle, who was pretty decent, and he drafts a right tackle, and then he drafts another tackle, and then he drafts another guard. So I don't know what's going on with this offensive line. They need a center. They don't have one. So we'll see what's going to happen there. You have to hope that this helps Daniel Jones with his turnovers, because the way he turned the ball over last year, as far as really just fumbles, was really unacceptable. And you want to see Saquon Barkley rushing for close to 2,000 yards. So I'm okay with the idea of trying to build the offensive lineman. Now, do they draft the best offensive lineman? We'll have to see. As a Giants fan, you always have to remember Eric Flowers was a top 10 pick as well, so that didn't work out too well. And McKinney, I don't really like that pick at all. I'd rather have seen them take a linebacker or a cornerback or a defensive end there. And now we'll have him paired with Peppers, and we'll see how that works out. So B+ for you. Now, moving on to your Jets, and you texted me that the Jets' first round pick, if everything works out, is going to be a Hall of Famer. So I don't know what was going through your mind there during draft night and your analysis on the Jets and their grade.
So the Jets' first round pick was Mikhail Becton, right? I stand by what I said because if the pick pans out, he'll be a Hall of Famer because the dude's 6'7", 360 and just mauls people. But of all the linemen, he does have the highest boomer bust draft grade, right? So as opposed to the Giants, who took probably the safer option up top with Andrew Thomas, and I think Iowa, Tristan Wirfs was also a much safer pick than Becton. But I trust Joe Douglas. There's nothing that he's done up to this point that would make me lose trust in him. He's clearly going for the boom aspect here. So they desperately needed a left tackle, the Jets. Much like the Giants, they need to be able to protect Sam Darnold. So I don't love that pick, but for like where all the offensive linemen were going at that part of the first round, like they ended up getting one, and they got one who they believe can not only help in pass protection, but they needed a lineman who was very good in a run blocking to open up holes for Le'Veon Bell because Bell struggled last year. So we'll see if Bell can improve this year. In the second round, they traded down. They accumulated more third-round picks and day 2 picks, and they ended up taking the Baylor wide receiver Denzel Mims with their second-round pick. So wide receiver was very deep this year. I think Mims is going to be a very solid pro. I don't think he's going to pan out and be like an elite number 1 receiver, but he is super athletic. He goes up and gets the ball. He's strong at the point of attack, and he's able to fight off defenders for the football in order to make catches, which is something that Robbie Anderson, who they let leave in free agency, could never do, right? So when you look at what the Jets needed to do with this draft, they didn't hit any home runs. I think they hit a bunch of singles. I like some of their other third-round picks and some of their day 2 picks, including getting the cornerback from Virginia who fell. I think his name escapes me right now. But overall, I think their draft right now is likely going to be a B. I can't really give it an A yet because, like I said, they were just looking to hit singles and a few doubles because they needed just talent and depth on the roster, more importantly than anything, because of the drafts that Mike McCagnon had in recent years. So that's my analysis. I mean, we'll see what happens with Becton. A lot of comparisons I saw were to Jonathan Ogden, who, again, was a Hall of Famer, but one day at a time.
And then we move on to the Eagles, whose fans are hurting over the Hurts pick. And they also they pass on Jefferson in the first round, which was a head scratcher. So what are your thoughts on what the Eagles are doing? I mean, something that I saw online, which was funny, which was, if you have a need for a new heating system and you have 5 cars, but the best thing available on the market is a car, you don't buy the 6th car, you got the heating system, you address your needs. Whereas the Eagles are saying, I'm going for the best player available. So what are your thoughts on, what the Eagles decided to do in this draft?
So you got to think 2 things in mind. I totally agree with you on passing up on Justin Jefferson. That was a real head scratcher. I think Jefferson has the talent and the ability to be the best wide receiver in the draft 5 years from now. So bypassing on him to get the more speedier wide receiver was definitely kind of a head scratcher. I think Jefferson's a much more polished route runner, but I guess they want somebody who could play inside in the slot and on the outside as opposed to Jefferson. And then in regard to the Jalen Hurts pick, so I don't love him, but I really like him as a prospect. And you have to keep in mind that Carson Wentz, since he got hurt, has yet to play a full 16-game season since. He just always gets hurt. And arguably, look at the Eagles. I mean, they know this better than anybody. Your most important position on the field is your quarterback. Your second most important is your backup quarterback. So I think that they were thinking if Hurts has got a lot of talent and they feel like he's still raw and they need somebody to coach him up, I like the fit with Hurts and Doug Peterson. Doug